Ericka, I am so thrilled to talk to you today. I love talking budgets and finances, and it sounds to me like you are the expert in this field. So, how are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, again, I'm so excited to talk to you and pick your brain. We're going to talk about right sizing your household budget today. And I should say that listeners write to me all the time with this concern. It is so easy to buy in 2021. How can we continue to purchase our needs, but step away from the wants? Because one want turns into 10 wants, and then holy moly, we blew our budget for the month. So that's what I want to get into with you today. But my first question, I suppose, would be what does it mean to you to right size a budget?
Well, that's a really good way to put it. Right sizing implies that we're probably doing it wrong, right? So right sizing means making sure that you're doing it right from here forward. And what I would say to that is make certain that you know what is right for you. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't look at what other folks are doing. It is so valuable to know how you currently spend, what the needs of your household are, and don't worry about what other folks are doing. And I say that because I think we do spend based upon what other people are doing. And we don't like to admit that, but there is definitely adult peer pressure. And so I want to make sure that people understand that we can get away from looking at what other people are doing and get very clear on what we're doing. The other thing when I think about right sizing is sometimes it's upside down. It literally is like our priorities are at the end of our budget. So if you're looking to save money, why are you waiting until the end of the month to figure out how much you can save? Let's do the saving at the beginning of the month or as soon as you get paid. Immediately move money into a savings account because if inevitably, if you wait 2 weeks to put that money in savings, it's going to be less. You are already anticipating spending less because you're concerned about putting it in savings and then having to pull it back out for something. So, right sizing to me means doing the highest priority, most important things at the top of the month, at the top of the budget, at the beginning of when you get paid, so that you can see how that's going to affect your goals versus spending money, not having a game plan. And then at the end of the month, you're like, oh my gosh, I only have $100 now to save. When at the beginning, I probably could have saved $500 if I had not made these other choices. So let's be intentional. And that's what I think right sizing your budget needs to look like.
Hmm. So I know you work with clients in helping them get their finances under control, if you will. How do you work with clients who have impulse shopping habits? I mean, again, I alluded to earlier the it's so easy to buy these days. Targeted ads, swiping of your finger, swipe right, it'll be here in 2 days. How in 2021 can we rein in the impulse purchases?
Yeah. The very first thing is to actually add it all up. That is a reality check. So it's like looking in the mirror and seeing if you like what you see. And if not, what needs to change, right? So we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror and we say, "Oh my goodness, I got to wash my face. I need to brush my teeth. I need to take a shower." You know what I mean? And we realize that there's something we can do to like wake ourselves up and look a little better. We've got to do that with our finances. We have to look at it. And I think the thing that people avoid most is adding up their expenses and what they have actually done. So I say go back and look at the previous month and see how much you spent on dining out, how much you've spent on, Amazon specifically or on shopping and get a total. And then some of the questions to ask yourself, one, am I okay with this? Is this what I thought? Maybe the third question that you ask yourself is this in alignment with my value system? Like, is this what I really want to be happening? Some people would rather give their money to an organization versus spending, $200 dining out. And so that might be a value for them that is out of alignment. And then also, are you reaching your goals? Is this helping you reach your goals? So that's why I say do those goals, those priorities at the top, at the beginning, as soon as money comes in. And then it honestly makes it a little bit more challenging for you to spend money on things that don't matter as much to you. So add it up, face it, and then ask yourself a few questions to see, okay, what can I do differently? And then finally, make a decision on what you actually are going to spend. Because I can't tell people, and I don't think that it's realistic to say no dining out will happen ever. That's not realistic, right? But you can monitor how often you are going out to eat and how much you're spending each time. And so maybe instead of going out 3 times a week, you bring it down to 1 time a week. It's not deprivation, it's just monitoring it so that you can do the other things that you want to do.
So, as I'm listening to your answer, which I'm totally on board with, I love it. I should definitely sit down with my budget and look at what I'm spending my money on. I can be completely honest and transparent and say that I don't want to do that because I know I'm not going to like what I see. So, do you have any words of encouragement for listeners like me who are know they're overspending, are scared to sit down with the spreadsheet, let's say that budget, perhaps scared to sit down with their partner and have that reality check because they know it's not going to be good? Do you have any words of encouragement?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just say it is scary. Like doing the work doesn't mean you're not doing it scared. So it is scary, but I don't want that to stop you from actually doing the work. But you can put in safeguards around yourself. So maybe you like chocolate. Make sure you got some chocolate or a candy bar or some Hershey's Kisses. Maybe you need a glass of wine. Maybe you need some mood music. Maybe you actually need to have a candle burning or something. Create a space, an environment where you can relax. And then maybe if you're with a partner, you say, hey, you know what, here are some ground rules. Like, we need to do this. I just want to make certain that, maybe we take 10 minutes or 15 or 20 minutes, whatever it is, and look at these things together. And I want to make certain that there's no judgment. So sometimes you have to lay out ground rules in order to create a safe space as well. The other thing that I would say is, don't do this just because someone told you to. I think you have to ask yourself the question, how badly do I want a different financial future? And the budget, facing your spending, having this reality check is going to help you get there. And so I would argue that if it is more scary to look at your current finances, ask yourself the question, how scary would it be if you did nothing? And what would your future look like if you continue to spend as you currently are? I want it to be your goal needs to be so big and so important to you that it's scarier to not achieve that goal than it is for you to make adjustments today.
So, when we're talking about right sizing our budget, getting our finances under control, usually that also means sitting down, creating a spreadsheet, needs versus wants. That's usually the common advice, right? If you have a partner, sit down once a month, make the spreadsheet, check your spending. I'm going to ask you how to do that. Like, for anybody listening who's never done that spreadsheet exercise before, I'm going to ask that. But before I do, I want to ask, like, that conversation stinks. At least it stinks in my house. I hate the first of the month because I hate sitting down with my husband and doing this. Is there any way to make it more enjoyable?
Well, honestly, I think the person who has a leaning to personal finance, who actually feels so much more secure knowing the numbers, should lead the effort. And so let me get specific. I'm a nerd, and I'm the one who enjoys looking at numbers. Obviously, I've chosen this as my profession for the last 16 years. And my husband wants to see headlines. He's interested only to the point where it's like, okay, I want to make sure we're still on target, um, that kind of thing. And so it's probably not for him fun at all to get into the budget and to look at all of those details. So I do most of it because that is not his gifting or his interest for that matter. And for me, I start getting annoyed and frustrated with myself if I've gone too long without having done it. So I say know your strengths and make sure that the person who is leans more in that arena is the one who's leading the effort. And then the other thing is making it fun. I think we need to take a step back. Sometimes the very first conversation is not the reality check. Sometimes the very first conversation is let's dream. Let's figure out what it is that we want. Let's see where we can come into agreement. What do we want to see a year from now? And don't even look at the numbers. That numbers conversation comes after you've decided what your goals are, your priorities are, what's going to make you smile, what's going to help you get up and go to work in the morning. Those are the fun conversations to begin with. And then you're like, okay, so how do we create that? That's where you start looking at the budget. So the fun conversation probably needs to come first where you're dreaming about what it is you want your finances or your future to look like.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I will say that in my own marriage, when we have a common goal, a common financial goal, a trip or an experience coming up that we're working together to make attainable, we're on the same team as opposed to being on opposite sides of the table, literally and figuratively. Um, Now, let's though get into the numbers. When you're working with your clients, how do the percentages work out? Like, how much should you be saving percentage wise? How much should you be putting to the side for fun?
Mhm. It honestly depends. So my business is called Tailor Made Budgets because every household is unique and every budget ought to be as well. I can give you guidelines. One of the biggest ones where we spend most of our money is on our residence, the place where we lay our head at night. And so for lots of people, this is their biggest expense in terms of a mortgage or rent. And if we start here and say that should be no more than 35% of your income, that's a great place to say, okay, great, one third and no more than that on housing, that kind of thing. When it comes down to saving, I mean, it's lovely to think that you can do 10, 10, 10. Give 10%, save 10% for yourself. I'm sorry, and then the 80% is what you live on. That would be lovely, but lots of people are in debt. So sometimes there's a disproportionate amount going towards getting out of debt so that you can free up that cash to do all of the other things. So I actually like to look at it as steps. First, get a little baby emergency fund. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, I'm a big fan. I'm one of his coaches. And get a baby emergency fund of $1,000 in the bank, then pay off all of your debt, all extra money. I mean, you potentially, depending on your income, you could be putting 50% of your income towards debt repayment to get out of debt and be done in a year or two. And then you're saving aggressively towards your 3 to 6 months. And then you're saving for retirement up to 15% of your income. And so while you're in debt, sometimes these percentages are a little out of whack. You know what I mean? Because you're really trying to pay off debt. For my husband and I, when we were trying to get out of our nearly $100,000 in debt, I mean, there were times when we were doubling up on our student loans to get them paid off. I mean, instead of paying $400, we were paying, $1,000 to get out of debt. And so that percentage was, way more than it ought to have been, but it's because we were serious about trying to make sure that that did not come back to bite us later. And so just know that, when you're trying to reach a goal, sometimes you're putting a whole lot more money towards that goal, and that's okay for that season.
Hmm. The season of life you're in dictate different percentages, let's say. Now, you mentioned getting out of debt, and I have a couple questions there, but I have pre questions to the question. And my first is, do you consider a mortgage debt?
It is debt, but that is not necessarily the debt we're trying to get out of right after, you have that baby emergency fund. You just there are some things you need to have in place. You need to get out of any consumer debt, which is card notes, your student loans, credit cards, medical bills, things of that nature, getting rid of those because those take up so much of your personal expenses. And then 3 to 6 months of expenses, saving for retirement, and then, after you've taken care of, college funding and things, you can go back to the mortgage and try and get that paid off as well at that point.
So, for those of us who are in debt, and I would be willing to wager that that's a lot of us listening right now. Should we be saving nothing for fun, or do we still get to have a little fun?
Always have fun. Always, always. So on my website, it says beat debt and enjoy the journey. We I want you to dump debt, but you can also have fun while you're doing it. So here's the thing, if you never put fun in, if you never enjoy yourself, if you never dine out, if you never go on a vacation and you're trying to get out of debt, what happens is at some point, you're going to be sick and tired of doing that. And sometimes you're going to just throw all caution to the wind and maybe reverse some of the progress that you've made. So I'd rather plan for fun than to assume it's not going to happen while you get out of debt. My family, when we were getting out of debt, we were able to at that time drive just 6 hours to California, and we went and took our kids to Legoland or to Disneyland, and we had lunch in our car because lunch in the park is so expensive. And we had dinner outside the park as well. And we had snacks or treats or whatever inside, but we saved money that way. And so we didn't deprive ourselves. We just did it differently so that we could do it with cash and not come home with a bunch of debt. And so it's not, the answer doesn't always have to be no on the fun stuff. It really is about how much you're doing and how often you're doing it and how it's adding to or taking away from your overall big picture.
I think you really just hit the nail on the head there. This conversation is less about making a budget, but more about balancing, living your life and enjoying your life because life is meant to be lived versus going overboard and paying for it later. And so your comment there about going to the park with the kids, everybody's having a good time, but eating lunch in the car. That's a really accessible way, I would say, for most listeners to have fun, but also not go overboard. Are there any other? Just I'm just curious. Are there any other ways you practice fun without going overboard in your own life with your family?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I've done staycations where we do a hotel that is, within driving distance, less than an hour away. And we don't have a pool. So it's nice to just go to a hotel that's a little bit nicer and have a pool and have a moment away. Going to museums that are free. Love that. I did that a lot when my kids were younger. Um, Nowadays some of the fun stuff is really, now that we have a dog, being able to take him to different parks and just seeing. I think we undervalue some of the things that we can do for free for fun, first of all. And so I think that we need to reinvigorate some of that and look at the things that don't cost us anything. I'm actually right now planning to, for my birthday, spending some time at a sunflower park, which is something I've never done. And so I'm like, this will be cool, something different. And that all it is walking through a little patch of sunflowers, taking pictures and all that kind of stuff. And I think, sometimes simple is truly better. I love, sharing books with people, having book clubs where you pass them around. I love resales, and my daughter's a thrifter. She loves to thrift. So sure, she gets new clothes from the store, but she also goes to Goodwill. I love donations and things like that. And so I think we have to expand what fun and shopping and all of that looks like. And then I love coupons too. I think that couponing, not being excessive, not an extreme couponer necessarily, but knowing that you're getting a deal and that you're able to save a little bit of money and still get what you need is also a part of the plan too. So being reasonable, I think, is so important, because sometimes the getting out of debt journey is not 1 year. Maybe it's a couple of years, and you don't want to be in a place where you feel like you can't enjoy yourself for that amount of time.
Yeah, something you said there really resonated with me. You were mentioning your sunflower garden. And that's a good reminder. Like, it shouldn't need to be said, but it does need to be said because in our consumerist culture, mm, we are taught to equate fun and enjoyment and happiness with spending money. And this is a simple living podcast. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. But my listeners know, and perhaps if they've forgotten, I know they know deep in their soul that we don't need to spend money to have fun necessarily. We have fun in our homes with a board game, right? Or a movie night, or I know going for a walk in the woods. That's fun to me. And all of those activities are family oriented and free. At the beginning, you did mention in passing, don't compare yourself to other people. And, my ears went off and I said, oh, I'm going to ask her about that later. So now we're circling back around and it's that time. And I just want to ask, like how? Because I live in a fancy neighborhood or an affluent area, I guess I should say. And so the keeping up with the Joneses is ever present in my life. I want my kids to have all the experiences, all the joy, all the fun, like we've been mentioning. Um, and so keeping up with the Joneses is, I think, I don't want to keep up with the Joneses, but even maybe perhaps subconsciously I am. So, do you have any tips for your clients or my listeners who really do struggle with keeping up with what their neighbors are up to?
Yeah, that is a very real and important conversation. And I'll touch on it. I think it is going to require some personal reflection too. So one, the first thing is the neighborhood you live in. Like literally the choice that we've made and where we are, there is something that is required of you, right? So one of the ways just on the surface level that in our neighborhood is the lawn, just keeping up with the lawn, the maintenance. And if we don't do it, then somebody's got to do it because the homeowners association is going to send you a letter if your lawn is not well kept. And that you almost have no choice because of where you decided to live. And so choice in where you live is the first one. Like living in an affluent neighborhood, you've made the choice that this is a part of your life, that the physical outward a part of it. Um, Having said that, I mean, I'm not telling people to move out of where they are, but all of these decisions lead to that comparison, right? Or the need to keep up because it is there, and so just know that that's a part of that puzzle. But I think modeling before your kids what's important is hugely important. So one of the things that we did is we said, first of all, it's for us, it matters a lot that our kids are involved, but it doesn't matter to me that they are in everything. And so we said, pick a sport, pick a thing. Don't pick five. One, you don't have time for that. Your studies come first, and financially, it just doesn't make sense, right? So we wanted them to figure out what their thing was, and they each did, and so that was great. And then we can focus our efforts on that one thing, not 12. And I think that helps when we're shopping for our kids or for ourselves. We give ourselves a budget. Back to school shopping is a certain dollar amount. Now that my kids are older, we've been able to just hand them money and say, hey, you go do this. This is all that you have. And it forces them to make decisions. And sometimes the decisions that they make are, we're going to go to thrifting, and then I'm going to get this one or two new sweaters or one pair of pants, and they are good. They realize that once the money is in their hand, it's not unlimited, and they spend way less. The other thing is, I mentioned this before, is know your value system. Like, what makes you tick? What makes you move? What gets you excited? And usually it's not stuff. So my husband likes nice things, and that means that sometimes the things that he likes are more expensive. And what we've done is you put a either an annual dollar amount on it or a monthly dollar amount on whatever it is that's important or of value to you. But the things that are not of value, we don't that's not a part of it, right? And so when we're looking at what other people are doing, if that's not a part of our value system or what we're up to, we've got to suppress, say no to, and be consistent with that in the things that are not important. We value travel, but we really don't care about all of the activities, being at all the sporting events and things of that nature. And so um we have to recognize that if you're spending money on things just because someone else is doing it, It's not in alignment with your value system. And I think getting clear on what that is really, really important. And it helps for the parents to know that because the kids will follow suit. They'll do whatever we end up doing.
Erica, what are three tips or three action steps, I should say, that listeners can take right now to right size their household budget?
The very first thing is to have that really important dream or goals conversation. That's the fun one. That's the one that makes you smile. That doesn't make your heart race. Definitely do that first, and then do the reality check where you're looking at the numbers and you're facing that. But create a space where you can do that and feel comfortable that you can complete it. And then also don't feel like you've got to do it all in one day. I think that's the other thing is maybe you spend 20 minutes this day and maybe you spend another 20 minutes another day in order to get those things done. Um, and then the other thing is sure you have to get down to business and write things down and commit to a plan of action, but give yourself grace. None of us are perfect. Absolutely none of us are perfect. And I think sometimes we think if we're going to be on a budget, we've got to do it perfectly, or I'm not ready, or I don't make enough money. It's never going to be the right time. It's never going to be perfect. I would love it, as a budget coach for the last 16 years, if it always worked out perfectly. But life doesn't fit into my spreadsheet so nicely all the time. And so give yourself some grace. Know that you're going to make some mistakes and you're not going to always do it exactly the way you wish that you had. And that's okay as well. And if you go into it knowing that, it's going to be easier when you face things that are going to potentially take you off track. So give yourself some grace.
Well, before we say goodbye, I want you to please tell us about tailor made budgets, what you do, where listeners can find you, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, so my business is Tailor Made Budgets, and you can find me on the web, www.tailormadebudgets, and that's Tailor. So it's tailor made for you, budgets.com. You can also get onto 7daymoneychallenge.com, and that's a free way to engage with me. I have a video every day for 1 week, and that's one small change that you can make in order to improve your finances. And that's the number 7daymoneychallenge.com, and engage with me as well. That will get you on my newsletter. And then you can find me on Instagram, Tailor Made Budgets. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ericka Young, lots of places to find me and connect.
Well, I'm going to add all of that to the show notes so it'll be an easy click for listeners who don't have a pen and paper available. But Eric, I want to thank you so much for coming on and offering your insight. What I love about you is that you see the big picture, right? It's not so much about the spreadsheet, it's about the balancing of enjoying life and also setting yourself up for a solid financial future. So thank you so much.
You are welcome. Such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me.